I am the lover of a gangster. After the boss was executed, I traveled through time to when he was 18 years old. He found the injured teenager Samuel Reed in the alley, pressed him against the wall and kissed him. If you dare to fight again, I will kiss you to death. Samuel? 3 years after Samuel was executed, I also died. I didn't want to commit suicide for love, I just counted the sleeping pills wrong. I really want to have a good sleep. Unexpectedly, I woke up and found myself back in 2010. That year, my dad had not gone bankrupt, and everyone who saw him had to call him Daniel. This year, I was still a carefree young man who spent money like water. This year, I didn't know Samuel. Samuel told me that he went to Tsinghua High School. It's a school so bad that I've never even heard of its name. At that time, Samuel was holding me, smoking a cigarette lazily after being satisfied. There are many dark alleys behind Tsinghua. I would fight with people there and never lose. 30-year-old Samuel is a reserved man. His wildness and unruliness have been ingrained into his bones. He no longer looks fierce, and he always smiles when talking to anyone. Not to mention fighting, they rarely even speak loudly. 30-year-old Samuel is strong but gentle. Things like impulsiveness and frivolity seemed far away from him. We met too late, and I never participated in his crazy and absurd years. I couldn't imagine 18-year-old Samuel getting into a fight. He said in a hoarse voice, "I'd really like to see it." Samuel smiled and shook his head, rubbing the back of my neck and saying, "Forget it, you'll scare the little master away." I never thought that one day I would really see Samuel when he was 18 years old. As he said, he may have never lost a fight. But that doesn't mean he won't get hurt. I just went to the back door of Tsinghua to try my luck, but unexpectedly I actually found a wounded Samuel in the alley. Crew cut, black t-shirt, sweatpants. When you get closer, you can smell the salty smell of sweat mixed with a light scent of soap powder. Samuel sat against the wall, a steel pipe at his feet, his eyes closed, his chest heaving violently. It looked like he had just finished a fight and hadn't recovered yet. He took out a cigarette, put it in his mouth and raised his head. The anger between his brows had not yet faded. He met my gaze and said in a bad tone, "What are you looking at?" "'Tis quite fierce." I squatted in front of him, carefully traced his face in the moonlight, and said slowly, "See what's wrong? Abandoned me for 3 years. I haven't had a good night's sleep for 3 years. Can't I take a look yet?" Samuel thought I was provoking him and looked at me fiercely. "Are you looking for a fight?" He looked like he might rush up and beat me up at any moment. Samuel is tall, strong, and very aggressive, and the words, "not easy to mess with," are almost stuck on his forehead. If I were really 18 years old, I might actually be scared by him. But I'm not 18. I am 38 years old, a widow who has been pampered by Samuel for 10 years. He can't scare me. "You've been beaten like this and you still don't behave." She pressed the bruise on the corner of his mouth fearlessly. "Does it hurt?" "Fuck." Samuel was stunned. After realizing what was happening, he frowned and opened my hand. "What's wrong with you? Stop touching me or you'll get beaten up." I raised my eyebrows. "Not happy. You used to want to stick to me 24 hours a day, but now you can't even touch me?" Samuel stood up with the help of the wall, paused for a moment, and then limped forward. The left leg is obviously not in good condition. I supported him and asked, "Is your leg injured? Come with me to the hospital." Samuel pushed me away and said warily and fiercely, "Don't bother me, get out of here." He threw me out and I almost fell down. "I'm so happy." He stepped forward, grabbed Samuel's shoulders, pressed him against the wall, pinched his face, kissed him, and bit him fiercely. "Awesome. I got injured in a fight and no one cares about me. Be mean to me, push me, and scold me. If you can't say nice things with your mouth, just don't say them." He will be obedient if he is convinced by the kiss. Samuel was indeed obedient, staring with his eyes wide open, his body stiff, his breathing stopped, and his face flushed red. Forgot, he is 18 years old and a newbie who can't even kiss. I let him go for fear of suffocating him and gently patted his face. "Take a breath." Only then did he take a deep breath. I chuckled. "Weren't you quite impressive just now?" Let me hear you say something more fierce. Samuel. I said, let's go to the hospital. Samuel stiffened his neck and said stubbornly, no. I leaned forward again and rubbed my lips against his lower lip. Samuel shrank back in fear and shouted in a timid tone, if you take advantage of me again, I will really beat you up. If you want to beat me, then do it. What are you shouting? I held back my laughter and said, go to the hospital? Samuel. I helped him to the intersection to get a taxi and said slowly, don't fight in the future. If you really want to fight, call me. Samuel sneered, do I know you? Why do you care about me? Who do you think you are? My name is James Phillips, and I'm your future man. I turned my head and glanced at him. If you dare to fight behind my back again, I'll kiss you to death. Samuel turned away and cursed me in a low voice. Psycho. What did you say? Samuel had no expression on his face and spoke very quickly. I didn't say anything. My left leg was slightly fractured and was put in a cast in the hospital. I asked the driver to drive to the hospital and told Samuel, stay at my house. Samuel disagreed. We just met, and you let me stay at your house. Don't you think it's presumptuous? I raised my eyebrows. What are you afraid of? Samuel sneered. I'm afraid you'll sell me out. I was amused. Are you worth money? A father who escaped from debt, a mother who died of illness, and a poor family. This is all Samuel has left. He has no worries, so he doesn't care about his life and doesn't plan for the future. Later he became a desperado. Samuel choked, pulled the corners of his mouth, and stopped talking. I rubbed his hairy head. Your legs are not working properly. I'm worried about you being home alone without anyone to take care of you. Stay at my house first. I'll let you go home once your legs are better. Samuel narrowed his eyes and stared at me. How do you know no one is home? Little wolf, you are quite suspicious. I smiled and made up a story, because I have a crush on you and have been paying attention to you for a long time. I even know the color of your pants, let alone your family situation. Samuel was amused. Then tell me, what color are my pants? Black. Hold. Samuel pondered all the way. After getting off the car, she said in a cold tone, hey, I don't like men, don't waste your time on me. Oh. I supported him and walked towards home, making a specious argument. Then why didn't you dodge when I kissed you just now? And you let me kiss you for so long, were you playing hard to get with me? I didn't want to hear his excuses, so I interrupted him and asked, are my lips soft? Is it soft? Samuel was blocked by me twice and said angrily, this has nothing to do with whether you are soft-spoken or not, don't change the subject. Heh. I rubbed his red earlobe, don't be so ungrateful. I kissed you, and you must be almost dead with pleasure. Samuel froze up under my pinch, breathing heavier, pulling my hand away, rubbing it unconsciously, and gritted his teeth and said, shut up now. I raised my lips quietly. I can't beat the 30-year-old Samuel, but I can easily defeat the 18-year-old Samuel. My dad is away on a business trip. I didn't ask the maid to tidy up the guest room and took Samuel directly to my room. When Samuel was taking a shower, I leaned outside the bathroom door and teased him through the door. Hey, is your leg okay? Do you want me to help? The doctor said you can't touch water. Before he could finish his words, he heard a muffled sound in the bathroom and Samuel's suppressed groan of pain. My eyelids jumped and I pushed open the bathroom door. Samuel! Samuel stood up with the help of the wall, the veins on his neck popped out, and he frowned and said, it's okay, I just slipped. Samuel was exposed to my gaze. The body of an 18-year-old is not as strong as that of a 30-year-old, but it is strong enough. He has a broad and well-proportioned frame with nicely defined muscles. There were many wounds, deep and shallow, on the wheat-colored skin. I know there will be more to come. Over the years, I kissed his scar more than once. Every time I see his scars, I feel irritated. Fortunately, there are not many scars now. Fortunately, Samuel is only 18 years old now, and I still have a chance to put a collar on this desperate wild dog. I closed the door, walked in, and stood in front of Samuel. Samuel's eyebrows were full of annoyance. Who let you in? I. I took off the shower head, held it in my hand, and said, Samuel, put your hands on my shoulders. I'll support you. Samuel gritted his teeth and said, No need. Stubborn bull. I held his wrist, put his hand on my shoulder, turned on the shower, avoided his injured leg, and rinsed him. He ran his fingers over the scars and whispered, Samuel, I don't like seeing you get hurt. Don't get hurt again. Samuel raised his head, took a deep breath, grabbed my hand, and said in a hoarse voice, If you want to wash, wash it well, and don't seduce me. I glanced down and laughed like crazy in my heart. I patted his firm belly with the shower head and laughed at him. Don't you dislike men? I haven't even started to seriously flirt with him yet, and this is it. Your brother doesn't really listen to you, but he's giving me face. Samuel didn't dare to look me in the eye. He lowered his head, rested his forehead on my shoulder, and said in a muffled voice, Stop talking. My neck is red. Samuel is so pure now. If you tease him any more, he'll probably explode on the spot. I tilted my head and kissed his ear, coaxing him softly, Do you want me to help you? Samuel's breathing became heavier. She bit him gently, Beg me and I'll help you. Samuel didn't move or say anything. Forget it, take your time. I moved, trying to push him away. Samuel probably thought I wanted to leave, and suddenly grabbed my wrist, put his arm around my shoulders, circled my neck, held me in his arms, and pressed half of his body against me. He said in a hoarse voice, Please. The bath took 2 hours. I let Samuel sleep with me. He just got scolded by me and didn't offer any comments. The bed was very big and we slept on each side. After a while, I said, Samuel, if I hold you while sleeping, will you hit me? Meeting. I laughed, turned sideways, and hugged Samuel from behind. His body froze for a moment and he didn't move. I slowly tightened my arms. Tighter, tighter. This way, you can't escape. I won't be left alone. When I was 25 years old, my father went bankrupt. He jumped from the roof of the company building, leaving me with a corpse and a huge debt. In order to pay off my debts, I borrowed money from everywhere, and I didn't care about my dignity or face. I drank and laughed with others at the drinking party, and was drunk until I was unconscious. Samuel was also in that game. After the end, I was leaning against a tree on the street to vomit. Samuel handed me a bottle of water and asked me, Are you short of money? I rinsed my mouth and said with a smile, I'm in great need of it. Samuel nodded and asked me, Are you okay with sleeping with a man? I said, That'll cost extra. Samuel put out his cigarette and smiled, What a coincidence, I just have a lot of money. What a coincidence. Samuel paid off my debts and I slept with Samuel. Slept for 10 years. Samuel is dead. Before he died, he left me a sum of money and said, James, don't sleep with others for money anymore. It's easy to run into scumbags. The last time I went to see Samuel, he smiled until his eyes turned red. I regret it. If I had known I would meet you, I should have accumulated virtues and done good deeds in the first half of my life, and prayed for a long life. James, I'm worried. He didn't say what he was worried about. He just said, James, live well. His fingertips slid across the glass as if wiping my tears. Fool, how can I have feelings for you when you are a lover who cannot be seen in public? You are useless. Don't cry, it's not worth it for someone like me. Whether it is worth it or not is not up to Samuel to decide. Samuel was not necessarily more successful than me. He kept a pair of rings close to his heart and never dared to take them out until his death. If I were to live my life over again, I would have only one wish. I want Samuel to live 100 years. I want to save him. I will not let Samuel go down the old path of gangsterism and end up dead. Since he doesn't value his life, I will cherish it on his behalf. If he doesn't plan for the future, I will do it for him. No matter how hard we try, we will drag him out of the abyss and bring him back to the right path. I always remember the regret Samuel expressed before he died. He didn't regret it before he died. He had regretted it a long time ago, but he couldn't say it when he was alive. He only expressed it when he was about to die. Samuel really liked listening to me telling him about my college life, but he said he never went to college. He said that he took the wrong path at the beginning and in the end, there was no way back. He said, "Who doesn't want to be innocent? But not everyone can be innocent. You have to survive first before you can think about whether you are innocent or not." He said, "James, when I was young, no one told me what to do, no one told me which way to go. This time, I held his hand and told him how to go. In his previous life, I helped him accomplish what he wanted but couldn't get, what he wanted to do but didn't do." After taking in Samuel, I secretly transferred to Tsinghua School. When I entered the class at noon, the teacher was giving a lecture while Samuel was dreaming with his head in his hands. He was the only one sitting in the row in front of the trash can. I walked over quietly, put my school bag next to him, and picked up a book from Samuel's desk. When I opened it, I was shocked. It was whiter than my face and didn't even have a name written on it. When the bell rang and the teacher left the classroom, I kicked Samuel's stool. The noise was so loud that it muted the noisy class. Adam at the front table nimbly jumped 2 meters away and looked at Samuel, who was on the verge of waking up, with caution. "Freshman, I advise you to run now, otherwise you will die soon. Samuel is really famously fierce." I smiled politely at Adam and said, "Thanks for the reminder." He turned around and kicked Samuel's stool again. "Adam." "Tiske." Samuel moved, without even raising his head, and casually grabbed a book and threw it at me, cursing irritably, "Get lost." He turned his head and changed direction, ready to sleep again. I caught the book and kicked it again. "Fuck. Is this ever going to end?" Samuel finally got up, looked at me with a cold face, and fell silent. He stared at me for a long while, then leaned his head against the wall, wiped his face, and muttered to himself, "Not awake yet." I threw the book in my hand at him. "Are you awake now, Samuel?" The school bell rang, and Samuel whispered to me, "Why are you here?" "I transferred to another school." Samuel frowned. "Why transfer? Wasn't your previous school good? Tsinghua's teaching quality is pretty rubbish." "Chasing you." "What?" I leaned close to him and whispered in his ear, "I will transfer to another school to pursue you." Samuel raised his hand, put his index finger on my forehead, pushed me away, and sneered at me, "I hate love-brained people the most." He pulled his hand away and said expressionlessly, "James, go back to your own school." The English teacher at the podium couldn't stand it any longer. "Samuel, take your new desk mate and get out of here to make out." "Samuel." Cover your face silently." Wow, how embarrassing. I became famous because of my English teacher's shouting. From then on, he lost his name and became the wild new student who made out with Samuel. When I woke Samuel up from his sleep for the 3rd time and forced him to study, Adam's eyes had changed from horror to admiration when he looked at me. He quietly gave me a thumbs up. "New student, awesome." Samuel was so annoyed that he almost burst out of his head. I pointed to the book and asked him to take notes. "Here, mark it." Samuel would rather die than obey, lowering his voice and saying fiercely, "Don't think you can do whatever you want just because you have a crush on me." I glanced at him and said, "Write quickly, don't force me to kiss you in the sacred classroom." Samuel was tortured by me for the whole afternoon. As soon as the bell rang, he jumped up from his seat and limped out on one leg as if he was running for his life. I grabbed his shirt and looked up and asked, "Where are you going?" "Bathroom." "I'll accompany you." Samuel quickly refused. "No." I stood up and hugged him. "Let's go. It's inconvenient for you with your lame leg. I'll support you." Samuel raised his eyebrows and repeated in an ambiguous tone, "Will you hold me up?" He bit his cheek and laughed. "That's fine." I was stunned for a moment, then I realized it and laughed. This brat has been bad since he was young. But I was just taking advantage of him verbally. When I really touched his waistband and pretended to help him up, Samuel held my hand. He lowered his voice. "Fuck, are you serious?" She squeezed my hand, lowered her head with red ears and said, "I'm wrong, brother. I'll do it myself. I won't dirty your hands later." I tickled his belly and laughed in an ambiguous way. "If you recite 30 words to me every night, I will forgive you once." Samuel hesitated. "I advise you not to push your luck." My hand moved and reached down. Samuel held me down and took a deep breath. Carry me. I'll carry you. For half a month, I looked after Samuel, studying during the day and memorizing his lessons at night. A study plan was also made for him. Samuel was used to being wild, and asking him to learn to behave himself was like asking his life to end. Sometimes when he gets pushed into a corner, he would smash books and say harsh words. He was convinced after a kiss. Samuel was tall and strong, but he let me press him down on the bed and kiss him until he was gasping for breath. I lay on top of him and acted like a tyrant. If you don't study, I'll kiss you. Samuel covered his eyes with one arm and held my waist with the other hand, as if afraid that I would fall. He sighed and said in a hoarse voice, "James, what on earth do you want to do by doing this?" I felt at ease listening to his strong yet steady heartbeat. "Samuel, have you ever thought about the future?" I hugged him tightly. "Let's pass the exam and go to the same university, okay? Go to school together, start a business together, and grow old together." This time, they supported each other and no one was allowed to leave first. Okay? Samuel said nothing. 7. Samuel hasn't been in a fight, or skipped classes, or left early, for a month. In the monthly exam, I went from last to 8th from last. I know to say hello to the teacher when I see him, even though I forced him to do so. The head teacher held my hand and praised me with tears in his eyes. "James, I want to give you an award." "That's not necessary." On the day I received the Peacekeeper Award, Samuel skipped school. I searched outside the school for a long time and finally found him at the entrance of an alley near Samuel's house. The plaster on Samuel's leg had been removed, and he was dragging a steel pipe towards the young men on the opposite side. Confident and arrogant. "Damn it, 1 against 6, I'm risking my life." I picked up a brick and rushed over. When I caught up with Samuel, I turned my head to look at him and gritted my teeth. "I asked you to fight and asked me to join you. Do you think I'm talking nonsense? I'll deal with you when I get back." Samuel was stunned for a moment, cursed, and stopped fighting. He threw the steel pipe, grabbed my wrist and ran away. The young men behind chased after him while cursing. The wind blew through my hair, and Samuel yelled at me, "Are you an idiot? Who the hell asked you to come here?" I ran so fast that I couldn't speak. After we walked through several streets and alleys and left the people behind us behind, Samuel finally let me go. The heart is under too much pressure and is about to explode. I held my knees and gasped. Samuel glanced at me and turned away. I grabbed his wrist and stared at him closely. "Where are you going? Come back to school with me." Samuel turned his back to me and was silent for a few seconds. The tone was cold. "Let go." Not only did I not let go, I held on tighter. Samuel looked down at me and said, "James, it's been a month, haven't you had enough fun yet?" My heart sank. "What did you say?" "Everything has its limits. When you've had enough fun, go back. I'm very busy and don't have time to play games like saving poor students with you." Samuel spoke calmly, but every word he uttered would create a hole in my heart. I stood up straight, shaking with anger, and grabbed Samuel by the collar. "Do you think I did all this to play a joke on you? Little bastard. Ungrateful." Samuel leaned against the wall, lit a cigarette, and looked at me calmly. "What else? What else?" I wanted to laugh but couldn't, and my eyes turned red with anger. What the hell am I doing here to have nothing better to do than to run to such a crappy place and mess around with a fool like you? Am I mentally ill because I was busy taking care of you when you were injured? Am I a jerk because I stayed up late to make study plans for you and sort out your notes? Am I kidding? Am I kidding you by being so sincere? Samuel, even if you are deaf and can't hear me say I like you, but you are not blind, right? I am laying my heart bare here, can't you see it? The smoke covered his cold face, but Samuel remained unmoved. He said in a cold voice, "James, do you think you are particularly great and affectionate?" He sneered, "Don't be so self-indulgent there." I was stunned, my heart tightened, and I smiled in disbelief. "What did you say?" "I said you are being self-indulgent and wishful thinking. You imposed so many expectations on me, but you didn't even ask me if I wanted it." Samuel laughed with a bad expression. "Study hard and make progress every day." "Damn it, study hard." James, since you like good students and honest students so much, you should just find a good student. Why do you have to reform me? It makes everyone uncomfortable. I have been living a good life for more than 10 years. There is nothing wrong with me and I don't want to change it. I am just like this, a scum, a villain. I can't learn well, I can't go to some crappy university with you, and I don't have any future. Samuel flicked the ash off his cigarette and said with his eyes downcast, James, I don't think the same as you do. You want me to be on par with you, but I can't do it. Sooner or later, you will be disappointed. That day, I heard your dad talking to you on the phone. Samuel finished a cigarette, his voice was hoarse. Your dad is right, Tsinghua is pretty bad, you are not suitable to stay here, you should go back to your original school. The two of us are not the same kind of people. Samuel heard James answering the phone behind his back, arguing with his father. He smoked 3 cigarettes in the bathroom. James' dad was right. Tsinghua sucks, James is great. James is destroying his own future in Tsinghua, and hanging out with him is even worse. In fact, he should have fired James on the first day he transferred to Tsinghua. He has 100 ways to make the young master who has never suffered give up. Later, none of them were used. James leaned forward and kissed him eagerly, and Samuel lost his mind. Samuel was quite afraid of James kissing him. It's not that I'm not moved. It's so heartwarming. He was so moved that evil thoughts grew wildly. He wanted to hold the man hostage and tie him up so that he could not leave in the future. That day, when James hugged him and said they wanted to apply to the same university, Samuel's blood boiled. Even during that month, I forgot who I was and studied really hard. I really fantasized that I could get into the same university as James. Until the debt collectors came to the door. The leader was named Brian and he said, Isn't that friend you made recently quite rich? Ask him to borrow some money. A basin of cold water was poured over his head, chilling Samuel to the bone. There was only one thought in my mind. I couldn't let these rubbish target James. His life is worthless, so if it's ruined, it's ruined. James was such a handsome young man, and it was heartbreaking to see him ruined. Samuel hated. He hated his life, hated his rotten father, and hated himself. Why can't you learn your lesson? How dare he dream of someone like James? Is he worthy of it? Samuel is such a jerk in his speech, always trying to insult others. He not only abuses me, but also abuses himself. I couldn't help it and beat him up. He grabbed him and punched him 3 times in the abdomen. Samuel frowned and didn't return the greeting. I was furious. I bit his jaw and said angrily, It's none of your business where I want to go to school. Whether we are the same kind of people or not, your opinion has no say. Then move up and kiss his mouth. Samuel dodged for a moment, but I slapped him in the face and he became quiet. Let me kiss you like a dead person. The closer I get, the angrier I get. Samuel's face was cold and his body was hot. Pretentious. I had vented enough anger and calmed down. Holding Samuel's shoulders, I suppressed my temper and asked him, Talk nicely, what happened? I don't believe a word that Samuel doesn't like me. Don't I know him yet? I am Samuel's ideal. In Samuel's words, not a cent more, not a cent less, every inch of it grows on the tip of his heart. If Samuel doesn't like me, there's no one else he likes in this world. This confidence was given to me by Samuel. During those 10 years, the old man wanted to take out his heart and throw it at me for fun. During this month, Samuel was completely under my control. Sometimes I get annoyed by studying and show my teeth, but a couple of kisses will make me feel better. If something hadn't happened, Samuel wouldn't have acted so abnormally and tried so hard to push me away. I thought, if there is anything, just talk it out and solve it. But Samuel didn't seem to think so. He asked coldly, Are you done with your madness? Let go when you're done. She pushed me away and straightened her clothes that I had messed up. You can stay in Tsinghua if you want. You're right, I can't control you, and similarly, you should stop controlling me. Samuel hasn't been to school for a week. He told me clearly in his attitude that as long as I didn't leave, he would not continue this course. Before I could figure out what to do, my dad came home from a business trip and we had a fight at home about transferring schools. I said to him casually, "Stop meddling in my business and focus more on the company's accounts." Daniel was very confident. "You know nothing about the company's affairs, just mind your own business. You know how many people you have offended in your business. In recent years, you have only been looking for partners. Have you ever checked the accounts? A 1,000-mile dam is breached by an anthole. You don't pay attention. If you get cheated in the future, you will cry. Asking you to check the accounts is not a big deal, so just do it." Daniel stared at me and laughed. "You worry a lot." Hearing this, I felt relieved. I breathed a sigh of relief, for I was afraid that my influence was insignificant and Daniel wouldn't listen to me. After it was mentioned several times intentionally or unintentionally, Daniel started to check it out. After checking, I actually found something. Daniel has things to do again. I hope he can be more successful this time and not go bankrupt again. He still has 7 years before he goes bankrupt. If things really get bad by then, I will cover for him. I couldn't find Samuel at school, so I just rented a house near his home. I was still angry and didn't rush to find him. Samuel is just that kind of person. He likes to handle things on his own. The mouth is tighter than a clamshell. When the anti-gang campaign hit him, he was so exhausted that he didn't say a word in front of me. It wasn't until Samuel's verdict came out that I knew he had been arrested. Samuel didn't want to tell me, so I checked it myself. I hired a private detective to follow him for a few days and actually figured out some clues. His father lost money in business, borrowed $3 million in loan sharks and ran away. The amount now is probably more than that. The debt collectors come every now and then. This kid is also very difficult to deal with. He never lies down and takes a beating. Every time they go to collect the debt from him, both sides suffer. The debt collectors also think it's bad luck. After a few beatings, they reached an agreement to pay $800 per month. The kid does odd jobs, so $800 is enough for him. But during this period, the debt collector heard that he had made a rich friend, so he thought $800 was too little and wanted him to borrow from that rich friend and get $200,000 in one go. I see that rich friend is me. No wonder Samuel was so anxious to distance himself from me. I paid the detective and asked him to follow me for 2 more days. The detective waved his hands and refused. "No, that guy found me and chased me for 2 blocks. If I hadn't run fast, I would have been beaten. If I continue to follow him, he will smash his sign." I didn't force it. Samuel doesn't want me to get involved in his affairs, doesn't want to be open with me, and wants to push me out of his world and sink into it alone. Dream. Samuel does jobs that make money quickly, but also carry high risks. He is good at martial arts and works as a security guard in various entertainment venues. To put it nicely, they are security guards, but in fact they are just thugs. I wore my sexiest outfit, a thin sweater with the opening wide open, and went to the bar where Samuel worked. When Samuel saw me, he was stunned for a moment. His eyes were like a sharp knife, looking me up and down. His brows were furrowed, and he opened his mouth and bit his cheek, but he didn't say anything. Thomas came over to chat with me and asked me to share the table. When he was urging me to drink, his hands touched me intentionally or unintentionally. Then he took out a cigarette, held a lighter and came closer to me, asking, "Will it happen?" I lowered my head and took a sip of the cigarette he handed me, then reached for the lighter. Before I could light it, the cigarette in my mouth was taken away by someone. Looking up, I saw Samuel put the wet cigarette butt into his mouth, tilted his head to light it, took a puff, pressed it into the ashtray, and said to Thomas, "Sorry, he doesn't know how to smoke." He exhaled mist, pinched the back of my neck, and lowered his eyes to me. "Have you had enough fun?" I was dizzy and smiled at him. Samuel's eyes darkened, and he frowned irritably. He pinched my face as if in revenge and said viciously, "You still have the nerve to laugh." He used all his strength to pull me up from the sofa and left. Thomas was not happy and held me tightly. "Brother, first come first served, understand?" Samuel brushed him off and said in a calm tone, "How do you know that you were here first?" Thomas was about to pull me back, but Samuel took me and took a step back. He pressed me into his arms, turned around and pointed at him, his eyes dark and full of anger. "Don't move. If you push him again, I'm afraid I won't be able to help but beat you up." Really? Stand there and don't move. Don't provoke me. This is for your own good. When Samuel gets angry, everyone is scared. Thomas didn't dare to move. Samuel walked me out of the bar. After walking through several streets and alleys, he stopped when the voices faded. As soon as his wrists were released, his back slammed hard against the wall, and then Samuel pressed down on him. He bit my lips and gnawed them like a dog. His hand reached under the hem of the wide sweater, rubbed the chest muscles heavily, and then moved down. His hands were covered with calluses and he was very strong, so I felt numb and painful when he touched me. Samuel kissed me so hard that I kept leaning back and my neck almost broke. His lips swelled up and he let go. He kissed my chin, Adam's apple, and collarbone. He thought I was too short, so he put his arms around my waist and pulled me up, then squeezed one leg in the middle to support me. I couldn't control my emotions, so I tilted my head back and called his name intermittently. Samuel's kiss became more and more excessive. He lifted up my loose sweater and nibbled on my chest muscles. He rubbed his hands on my stomach and went to unbutton my pants. I shuddered and held his hand tightly. Samuel, that's enough, no. It's outside. Why not? Samuel raised his head, breathing unevenly, his palms pressed against my lower abdomen, his lips moist, his eyes hazy. You dressed like this and came to me to do it? Isn't it because you want this? Now my mind was clear and the anger that had been aroused had subsided. I asked in disbelief, "What did you say?" Samuel chuckled, his tone cruel. "Why are you pretending? You seduced me all night. Do you really think I can't see? You want it? I'll give it to you." I slapped Samuel in the face and pushed him away. I hit Samuel's head and he was cut at the corner of his mouth. His dark eyes reflected the light from the street lamp, which was icy and stinging. After a while, he raised his hand and wiped the blood off the corner of his lips. I turned around and walked back. After a few steps, Samuel caught up with me. He grabbed my wrist and pulled me back, asking, "Where are you going?" I sneered, "Is it your business? I can't control you." Samuel pulled up my sweater with the neckline wide open, still cruelly, "But if you want to have fun, go somewhere else. Don't be a bitch in front of me." None of what he said was pleasing to hear. I nodded and said, "Okay, I'll find a place where you can't see me and have sex with someone." Samuel's hand holding mine suddenly tightened and he stared at me fiercely. He was so angry at me that he couldn't speak and didn't move for a long time. I moved my wrist and said, "Let go." Samuel remained motionless, suppressing his rising anger inch by inch, and after a long while he managed to say, "That's not what I meant." After a long while, Samuel lowered his head and said in a muffled voice, "I was wrong today. Please don't be angry with me. James, I beg you. Please go back, don't do this." I saw the young man's red eyes, like a trapped beast that could not break free from the net that bound him. He was in so much pain and so much despair. After trying every trick he could think of, he finally ran out of tricks and bent down, begging for mercy. I looked up and took a deep breath. "James, you are such a jerk. Why are you bullying him like this? He's already in a lot of pain." Before he could say those hurtful words, he would first scratch his heart thousands of times. "I feel pain and so does he. 11. But if it doesn't hurt, you won't learn good behavior." I took 2 steps forward, held Samuel's face, kissed his red eyes, and asked, "Samuel, are you really comfortable with me being alone?" Samuel trembled when I kissed him, but he didn't say anything. I continued, "Look, I won't be better off alone. Really, if you don't want me, I can do anything. I've gone crazy a long time ago, and if you don't hold me back, I'll die." Samuel said, "James, what do you want?" I saw Samuel's tears. He stepped into the mud viciously. "I'm not worth it. Not worth it for me. Do you understand? Why do you have to get involved with me? You deserve better, but not me. Whether it's Samuel at the age of 18 or Samuel at the age of 30. Whether you have nothing or are successful." Samuel felt deep down that he was not worthy of me. So at the age of 18 he pushed me away. The 30-year-old man held the ring in his hand and remained silent. I asked him, "Better? Samuel, is there anyone in this world who can treat me better than you?" Samuel looked at me for a long while, lowered his head, covered his face with his hands, slowly squatted down, and curled up on the ground. I heard the suppressed crying of 18-year-old Samuel. Hoarse and choked. "Why are you forcing me? I can't bear it. I can't bear it either." Quote. I pushed Samuel to that point and left him no room to back down. 2 months after his disappearance, I brought Samuel back to Tsinghua. We had finally made some progress, but after this incident, we were back to the time before liberation. After the meal, Samuel became much more well-behaved and took notes on his own initiative. I smiled with relief, looked at the table, and was furious. "This is a math class. What the hell are you writing in a physics book?" "Samuel?" I could sense his distraction. Not only was he absent-minded, but his entire body was tense and his temper was getting worse and worse. At first, I couldn't ask why. Later, he ran into Samuel at the entrance of the alley, arm in arm with the young man who was collecting debts that day, and they were beating up a middle-aged man together. Samuel's expression was calm and his blows were heavy. After getting the money from the man, the young man with Brian on his face put his arm around Samuel's shoulders and said with a smile, "It's you, brother. This deadbeat has been chasing him for 3 months without saying a word, but you finally made him obedient. Matthew is really good at this. You're meant to do this. If you had followed Matthew earlier, you would have become rich earlier. Let's go for a meal together." Samuel threw his hand down, picked up the school bag by the wall, waved his hand and walked back. "No, I have something to do." I followed him not far away. I saw Samuel turn into a public restroom, slowly wash the blood off his hands, stand under the house I rented for a while, and then turn around and go home. When he came out again, he had changed his clothes, carrying a school bag in his left hand and an English book in his right hand, and walked towards my house. I walked and memorized words along the way. I walked downstairs to my house, but I hadn't memorized it yet. I recited it for a while at the stairs before going upstairs. There was not a single mistake in the English dictation in the evening. Samuel watched me finish correcting it and laughed contemptuously. I said indifferently, "That's good. Let's do math." Samuel stared at me without moving. I turned my head and did my homework. Samuel came over and said unhappily, "James, did you forget something?" I didn't even look up. "What?" "I got all the English dictation correct." "Oh." Samuel leaned his head and stared at me intently. "James, you forgot to kiss me." Pointing at the dictation paper, he said, "In the past, you would kiss me if I got all the English dictation correct." And kiss him? I didn't hit anyone because I had a good temper. I dropped my pen, looked up at him, and deliberately asked, "Samuel, who is Matthew? I'll never be able to wait for him to confess in my next life." Matthew. I know. At that time, he was already the chairman of Jumbo Group. In the 3rd year that I followed Samuel, this man died. Killed by Samuel. After he died, Samuel dug his grave and sat on the balcony smoking half a pack of cigarettes. Jokingly said, "If it weren't for him, maybe I could still be a good person." Later, Samuel was arrested, but his crime was not punishable by death. He was sentenced to death because he committed murder. He was forced to be Matthew's thug and his blood was on his hands, so he couldn't claim to be innocent. Matthew pushed the desperate Samuel into hell. I thought that this time, if I held Samuel, I could avoid Matthew. But I was deceived by Samuel. I thought he had learned his lesson, but in the end he was still pretending for me. Still don't tell me anything. Still have to carry everything by myself. Don't you think about whether his miserable life can bear it? Samuel stood up suddenly, overturning the chair, and leaned down with his arms on the backrest, his eyes tense and his eyebrows slightly angry. "How do you know him? Did they come to you? Did they threaten you?" I looked at him quietly. Samuel stood up, paced around the room twice, then leaned down again, holding my face. He was confused and said quickly, "James, don't be afraid. Go back to your home for 2 days, don't live here. You have a driver and bodyguards at home, you are safe. Don't come to see me recently." "Samuel." I held his arm and soothed him. "Calm down. I'm not scared. I'm afraid of him." Samuel was silent for a moment. The veins on his forehead jumped a few times, then he turned and rushed out the door. I quickly jumped up and hugged his waist. "Where are you going?" Samuel's brain was broken, his eyes were red, like an angry beast. I'm going to find them, I'm going to kill them. I promised them everything, why did I come to you? In this case, you'd better not live anymore. They didn't come looking for me. I saw it myself. I saw you and that Brian face beating someone up. Samuel fell silent, his back to me, and he didn't move. I whispered, Samuel, they're threatening you with me, aren't they? Samuel pulled my hand away and said hoarsely, you can see it all. I have no future. I only have 10 million in debt and endless troubles. James, think about it again, think about it carefully. He opened the door without looking back and said in a hoarse voice, James, it doesn't matter even if you give up on me. Samuel retreated back into his shell. I sold my personal belongings, took out the New Year's money I had saved for more than 10 years, and raised $200,000 to go find Brian and meet Matthew. $200,000 to buy Samuel for 1 year. And promised that within 5 years, Samuel would pay off all the debts. I thought it would be difficult, and even thought about what I would do if Matthew was unwilling to let me go. As a result, Matthew agreed readily. Originally, it was a bad debt that could not be recovered, but now someone was willing to pay to fill the hole. Matthew had no reason to refuse. He was afraid that the money would run away, so he did not take the money. Matthew hasn't reused Samuel yet and doesn't take him seriously. At most, he lets him collect debts under his command. In Matthew's eyes, Samuel is now worth far less than $200,000. Matthew counted the money and said to me with a smile, I asked that guy to borrow from you a long time ago, but he still refused. I don't mean to make it difficult for him. It's only natural to pay back a debt. I didn't have time to listen to his nonsense, so I just said a few words to him and left. When I came out, the sun was shining brightly and it hurt my eyes. I think it's ridiculous. It was something that could be solved with 200,000 yuan, but it cost Samuel his life. That's fucked up. 14. On the third day of Samuel's leave, I broke into his house. That was my first time going to Samuel's house. The house is not big, there are few items, and they are all neatly arranged. The only mess in the living room were the scattered wine bottles and Samuel sleeping on the sofa with a bottle in his arms. I paid the locksmith, walked over, squatted beside the sofa, and patted Samuel's face. Wake up. Samuel frowned, opened his eyes, looked at me for a long time, let go of the bottle and hugged me. He was very strong. He held me and turned me over, squeezing me between him and the sofa, wrapping his arms and legs around me, hugging me tightly, rubbing his chin on my head, muttering, James? Then he said, James? Don't leave, don't ignore me. The wicked are the first to complain. Who ignores whom first? Samuel was clearly unconscious, half drunk and half fevered. It's hot to the touch. I pushed him and said, Samuel, let go. You have a fever. I'll find you some medicine. It would have been fine if I hadn't pushed. Once I pushed, Samuel held me tighter and said unreasonably, no. He also said, I got all the English dictation correct. I still remember it. His big hands touched my face and he groped and kissed me, from the tip of my nose to my lips, and said in a hoarse voice, all right, reward me. I then realized that the reason I was able to push Samuel away before was because I was holding back. If Samuel is unwilling to retreat, I can't push him away. This guy is ridiculously strong. He closed his eyes and kissed me from top to bottom, lifting up my shirt and kissing my belly button, then he pulled up my pants. I felt uncomfortable with his kiss, so I pushed his shoulder and said, Samuel, you still have a fever, wait until you recover. Samuel held my wrist and kissed my hand bit by bit, saying vaguely, I don't have a fever, I'm not sick, I'm fine. Damn it, he scalded me to death. 15. Samuel charged forward despite being sick and collapsed right after finishing the charge. With my legs shaking, I found 2 fever-reducing pills and fed them to him randomly. I fell on the bed and fell asleep immediately. Animal. We'll settle the score when you wake up. When I woke up again, it was dusk. The sky was dim and Samuel was sitting on the bed smoking. I moved closer and when he wasn't paying attention, I put out his cigarette with my hand. Hold. Samuel quickly took the cigarette away and pressed it into the ashtray. He held my hand and looked at the burn mark. The veins on his forehead were throbbing. James, do you want a cigarette? That's a cigarette butt. Why are you rubbing it with your fucking hands? I didn't care much and said, don't smoke anymore. If you don't learn well at such a young age, you will get sick when you are old. Samuel didn't say anything, he just stared at my hand for a long while, then he pinched my burned finger and put it into his mouth. Fingertips are soft. Her heart softened, and she pulled her hand away, holding Samuel's face and kissing him. Samuel held my waist and let me kiss him for a while, then he held me tightly in his arms and said in a hoarse voice, I'm scared of you. 16. Samuel's grades were extremely poor and he started making up for it too late. Naturally, the college entrance examination results were not ideal. 268 points hit Samuel hard. I wanted to review with him, but Samuel disagreed. But he can't beat me. During the review year, Samuel worked very hard. Sometimes when I woke up at night, I would see Samuel turning on a light, studying hard at his desk. In the past, I forced Samuel to study. Now, I am forcing Samuel to rest. Samuel didn't think anything of it and comforted me by saying, it's okay, I'm not tired. Many times, he would fall asleep while eating. I got angry and quarreled with him. Samuel listened to me scolding him, and then he hugged me and kissed me. Until one day after a quarrel, Samuel lowered his eyes and said, James, I can't let you down. You said we went to college together. I remember that. You can't forget it either. James, I don't want you to give in to me. Samuel stroked my face, his eyes gentle, you deserve the best. But if it has to be me, I want to be the best. Samuel didn't know it, he had always been the best. 17. I was 35 years old. Samuel has a successful career. Even my dad was full of praise for him. The reason for all the praise, of course, is that Samuel helped him through a bankruptcy crisis 10 years ago. At that time, in order to fill the hole in my father's account, Samuel took out all his savings, and the company that had just started almost went bankrupt. On August 7th, there was a heavy rain. I dreamed of Samuel's grave. When I woke up, I stared blankly at the heavy rain outside the window. The door behind me opened. I heard the man's heavy breathing. Samuel rushed in, soaked in rain, panting with red eyes. I was stunned. Aren't you on a business trip? How come? Samuel took a few quick steps, rushed over, hugged me tightly, and called my name. James. James. The hot and wet water dripped onto my neck. Samuel's voice was hoarse and choked. My James, you have suffered. In an instant, tears filled my eyes. I grabbed Samuel's clothes tightly and burst into tears. Samuel, I dreamt that you died. I won't die. I will stay with James and live a long life.